So how long will my E2 visa be valid? How many times can I enter the US with my E2 visa? How long can I stay in the US in E2 status when inside the US? These are all the questions I'm going to do my best to answer in this video. First and foremost, welcome back to the channel. I'm Attorney Adrian Pandev, and I'm recording these videos to hopefully make the maze that is the US government easier to navigate for any foreign nationals who are watching these videos. Now, this video is a part of a larger segment of E2 related videos I've been recording, and this one will focus on a very specific question and basically visa validity dates, right? What does it mean? How long is the visa approved? Then once you have the visa, how many times can you enter and, come into the US with it? And then finally, how long can you stay in the US? Now, this causes a lot of confusion, even for people who have E2 visas. So a lot of my clients often reach out and I can tell they're confused about this. So the goal is to just once and for all sort of clarify this, because there's a few separate dates and timelines that are absolutely critical that you have to keep in mind. So let's start first and foremost with how long is the visa valid? This is an interesting question because it's not as clear-cut with E2s as some other visa types where it's generally always the same. Now, as you know, or should know if you watched all the videos, E2 visas are not available for every citizen of every country. So the bottom line is the E2 is a treaty investor visa, so there has to be a treaty between the United States and the country citizenship from which the applicant comes from in order to even receive an E2 visa. So now the E2 visa validity dates, right, depend on that treaty and sort of the associated regulations, right, from the Department of State regarding that particular countries. So for example, if you're from, let's just say Argentina, or we could use Canada, Germany, a long list of E2 countries, the maximum validity that an E2 visa can be approved for will be 5 years, right? 5 years, that's the max. And many countries do have this five-year validity date. But to give you an example, right? Many other countries have a significantly shorter validity date, right? Azerbaijan or Bahrain only have 3 months, right? Similarly, Bosnia, just to stick with the A's and the B's, right, only has a 1-year validity date. So what am I talking about here when it comes to validity dates? I'm talking about the date of issuance to expiration date of your E2 visa. Why is this date critical, right? And what does it signify? Well, what it signifies that during that validity time, right, during those specific months or years, you can use that visa to enter the US. The easiest way to know, right, how long your visa was approved, very simple, right? The E2 visa stamp, like the actual passport page, the stamp that gets put into your passport, will have these from to dates. That's what we're talking about here, right? Now, keep in mind, E2s are pretty cool in the sense that everyone, even visa-exempt countries like Canadians, get visas. So what I'm saying right now applies to everyone, right? So if you want to double check the validity date, look at those dates on the visa stamp, right? Now, keep in mind, again, there are maximums based on the country, and those are like the consular officer, right? The State Department cannot issue it for longer than that, right? And we have a blog on our website that I'll make sure is in this description of this video that actually lists out all the validity dates, right? But the bottom line is during those 2 dates, you can enter the US using that E2 visa. That's all it signifies. That is what visas are for, right? They're an entry document, and that's what the validity date is for. Now, so in addition to the validity dates, there's another critical number on this visa page, and it has to do with entries. So when you look at the visa, there'll be a part that says entries, which will say, often it'll just be like not even a number, it's going to be a letter that will say M for multiple or S for single, or it could be 2 for 2 entries. And basically what it signifies is how many times during the validity date you can use the visa to enter the US. Now, most E2 visas are approvable for multiple entries. It's the vast majority of E2 countries are multiple entries. So what that means is if you see M for multiple on that visa page, you can, during the validity dates, enter the country as many times as you want, basically. There's no limitation. But some are single entry visas. So just going back to the examples I gave, Azerbaijan is an example. It's a 3-month single entry visa. So you can enter anytime during those 3 months, but you can enter only once. The moment you leave, you will need to get a new visa to come back. Now, this is something very important to consider because a 5-year multi-entry visa is significantly more valuable than a 3-month single entry visa, right? And so you need to review the exact duration, like the validity dates, as well as the amount of entries the visa grants before you jump into this endeavor, because E2s require investment. It's a huge commitment from you, and you need to make sure that the visa you're getting is actually worth the investment to you and your family, right? Now, besides validity dates and how many times, right, whether it's multiple or single entries the visa grants, there's another critical date here for E2 visas. That has to do with how long you can stay when you enter the country. And it's always 2 years. So I know this is confusing, but basically, regardless of how long the visa is valid, regardless of how many entries it provides, when you enter the US, you always are allowed to stay in the US for 2 years. And people always ask me, and they're like, this doesn't make any sense. Why would they give me a 5-year visa and then just let me in for 2 years? Or vice versa, why would they give me a 3-month visa and then they're letting me in for 2 years? Well, what you have to understand is that the visa, right, is just an entry document. It's a document that you show to the Customs and Border Protection officer, and it allows that border officer, right, customs officer, to let you into the country. That's all it is. It's just entry. The moment you enter the country, you're issued what's called an I-94 document, and that governs your status in the country. So the moment you cross the border, the way I explain it to clients, the visa is it's basically irrelevant because you've used the visa to enter. Now that you have been allowed to enter, you will receive that I-94 document that Customs creates. It's done electronically. You'll find it online. And that document governs your status. So that document will say what your status is, in this case E2, and how long you're admitted. And it's always, or generally, in the vast majority of cases, 2 years for E2s. So what does this mean, right? Well, it means that there's a lot of planning opportunity here, right? Because say you only have a single entry 3-month E2 visa, if you're from one of those countries, right? In those cases, right, you could still come in that one time, stay here 2 years to direct and develop your business, right? And then if you depart at any time, whether it's at the end or during those 2 years, you need to go get a new visa. But for some people who don't have, serious family ties or don't care so much about traveling outside the country, that works, right? And it might make sense if someone has a good US business idea. So even though the visa validity is short, I've seen many people from these countries still explore the E2. Similarly, people who have 5-year E2 visas need to be careful because they think, oh, my visa is valid for 5 years. Say they don't want to travel internationally. Well, they could still overstay their 2-year granted, allowed status in the US. So you need to track this and be careful about it. So people who have the 5-year multiple entry E2 visa just need to make sure they leave, right? So before you hit that 2-year mark when your status expires, just leave and come back. You have a multi-entry 5-year visa so you can come and go, right, during that period. But remember, every time you enter, it's just 2 years. Now, here is where this allows a lot of creative planning opportunities, right? In essence, this extends the validity of the visa. And what I mean by that is, yes, it doesn't extend your ability to come into the country because that's governed by the visa validity dates. But what it allows you to do is, say you have a 5-year visa and you enter at the very end of that validity date, right? It's say year 4 years and 10 months. When you come in, you're still given 2 years because every time you enter, it's 2 years, right? So in essence, you're kind of extending it from 5 years to closer to 7 years in some cases if you strategically plan around this. Now, to be really honest with you, most people don't do this because they just want to file an extension. They want to get a new, E2 visa and they don't need to do this. But what I'm saying is, there's a lot of creative planning that can come in very, very handy. And to be honest with you, all of this to me, when I realized the enormous value in this was the COVID-related travel restrictions, where people, although visas were expiring and all those visa renewal dates ended up, getting pushed back and delayed, there were no issues with statuses because people had just recently come in, they got the 2 years, and they were able to stay here and weather the storm during COVID inside the US and didn't have to wait for an E2 visa to come back. So the bottom line is know the differences between these, right? The visa validity date, the number of entries are allowed, right? Whether it's multiple, single, or 2 entries. And finally, know that every time you cross the border using that E2 visa, every time you're given 2 years of E2 status to be in the US. At the end of those 2 years, you either have to leave the country and come back, or you have to file for an extension of E2 status for another 2 years with USCIS. The bottom line is, do not mess these up, because I've seen people inadvertently, misunderstand and overstay visas and make mistakes. There's no need. You don't want to do that, right? Nothing good will come from that. So anyway, I don't want to make this video any longer. I hope it was, helpful. If you have any comments, questions, anything about this, put it in the comments, please. And I'll do my very best to record more videos and share as much as I can with you all. And thank you so much for watching. If you find the channel helpful, I would appreciate it if you could follow and like the video and follow the channel. It helps me tremendously. And yeah, thank you for watching.